Today we're going to look at our next chord progression. That's the 6-2-5-1 progression. This simply adds one more chord to the 2-5-1 that we've studied previously. You might have noticed from the text accompanying this video that we've indicated the 6th chord in lowercase Roman numerals, so we'll be expecting another minor chord at this point. We can confirm this by building the chord in our usual way. So if we return to our familiar key of C major, the scale of C major, we go to note 6 and add alternate notes from the scale, giving us notes 6, 8 and 10. Of course, note 8 is the octave, therefore takes the same note name as the tonic, and quick calculation will show us that note 10 is the same note as note 3, again raised by one octave. So we could say that our 6th chord is built from notes 6, 1 and 3, or notes 6, 8 and 10. If we look at the intervals formed by these notes, we can see that between note 6 and note 8 we have an interval of one tone and one semitone, making a minor third, and between notes 6 and 10 we have a perfect fifth. So our 6th chord is another minor triad. We're in the key of C. The 6th note is C, D, E, F, G, A, which means our 6th chord in the key of C major will be the chord of A minor. So our complete 6-2-5-1 progression will consist of A minor, D minor, G and C. Notice we don't always say G major, C major. If we name a chord without calling it major or minor, then the convention is to assume that it's going to be major. So once again, A minor, D minor, G and C. And as with our other progressions, we can move this around the cycle of fifths. So in the key of G we find note 6 is G, A, B, C, D, E. So our 6-2-5-1 in the key of G will be E minor, A minor, D and G. In the key of D we'll have E minor, E minor, A and D, and so on through the keys. Now I'd like to pause for a moment and look at something interesting about the way the chord roots move here. So returning to the key of C and our progression A minor, E minor, G, C. The roots of the chords are now A, D, G and C. Now if we take these notes and play them in ascending order of pitch, so if we start this note A here, D here, G here and C here, we can see that they all line up on a single fret space in the guitar. This means that each root note moves by an interval of 1/4 at each chord change. So we have a fourth between the A and the D, fourth between the D and the G, fourth between the G and the C. Of course, as you may well be aware, the lower 4 strings of your guitar are tuned in fourths, so the interval between the open strings in each case is a fourth, therefore the interval at any fret is also a fourth. Now if we reverse this, start from this high A up here and play the notes descending in pitch, we'll see we come down from A to D, from D to G, and from G to C, and the interval between each pair of notes is the fifth. So this tells us that the 5th and the 4th are in effect mirror images of each other. Movement upwards by a 4th is equivalent to a movement downwards by a 5th. So from here we could go up a 4th to here, or we could go down a fifth to there, and the two notes are an octave apart and therefore effectively the same note. Equally, if we go up a fifth or down a fourth, once again we arrive at the same note. So to reiterate, in our 2-5-1 and 6-2-5-1 chord progressions, in each movement the root of the chord moves up by an interval of a fourth, which conversely could be viewed as moving downwards by an interval of a fifth. Now, movements of a fourth or a fifth are extremely frequently encountered. Remember, going back to our first chord progression, the 1-4-5, we obviously have a movement of a fourth between the 1 and 4. There's an interval of a fifth between the 1 and 5. And there's also an interval of a fourth between the 5 and 1. So the popularity of this kind of stepwise movement by fourths or fifths not only applies to chord changes within a key, it also applies to music that changes key. You will very frequently, not always but very frequently, find that when a piece of music changes key, the tonic of the new key is a fourth or a fifth away from the tonic of the original key. If you remember our discussion of the cycle of fifths, you'll recall that when the tonic moves by a fourth or a fifth, then just one single note changes in the scale. So keys that are a fourth or a fifth apart are therefore very closely related and can usually then be relied on to work well together. Okay, back to our 6-2-5-1 chord progression. When might we use it? Okay, let's start with the 1 chord and move to the 6 and then go round the chord progression in a cyclic kind of pattern. This chord progression can be a simple song structure in its own right. It generally puts me in mind of old music hall songs, or if you're watching this in America, vaudeville songs. If you've seen Monty Python's Life of Brian, you may well recall Always on the Bright Side of Life. And so forth. And the other very important use for the 6-2-5-1 is as yet a further extension of the perfect cadence. Remember, our perfect cadence is the ending that goes from the 5 chord to the 1 chord. We saw that we can use the 2-5-1 progression to extend that, and the same is true of the 6-2-5-1. And we can demonstrate this with yet another version of the 12-bar blues. In this case I'm going to introduce another variation just to add a bit of interest, which involves going down to the 4 chord in the 2nd bar rather than staying on the 1 chord for 4 full bars at the beginning. So we can play 1, 1, this variation, each 12-bar pattern then ends on the 5 chord, in effect an imperfect cadence, and then the normal thing to do would be right at the end of the song to go back to the 1 chord, thus completing the 6-2-5-1 progression and thereby the perfect cadence. So once again, we have the 6-2-5-1 chord progression. This is the last chord progression we're going to study in triads in major keys. We'll be returning to these chord progressions later when we come to discuss chords with more than 3 notes in them. That will come after we've had a look at the triad progressions in minor keys. However, before we move on to that, in my next video I want to take a small digression and have a brief discussion about the concept of chord voicings and chord inversions. So I look forward to joining you then. Until then, goodbye.